So, my name is Trudy. I am the founder of InsightLA, um, and continue to teach these Sunday mornings very happily with my friends who teach together with me. And today, and I'm speaking to you from uh, Marin County, from the home of the indigenous people, the Miwok Indian tribes. There were 12 of those tribes who lived here and cared for the land before the settlers moved in. And today I would like to talk a little bit about wisdom as the Buddha conceived of wisdom, which is super practical. Wisdom really being how to handle wisely uh, our lives and what comes up in our minds and hearts. So, for those of you who may be new to Insight LA or new to this sitting group, not only do I warmly welcome you, but also just to share that we divide the time roughly into thirds, where we do a silent sitting meditation with a little bit of guidance, which we will do right now, and then have some teachings and then some exchange, some conversation and dialogue with each other. So we're going to meditate now, and if you can find your um, comfortable spot where you can sit quietly and be pretty still for approximately 30 minutes. Get the bell. I like to begin by taking a deep breath in and releasing, and taking another conscious and deep breath in, and just letting that breath infuse any tight or tense places in your body, and then releasing that tension as you breathe out. And one more time, breathing that warm inhalation to the whole body, and then gently releasing with the out breath. And then just continuing to keep your breath company with your attention, breathing in the aliveness of each moment, breathing out, just allowing that breath to dissolve into space at the end of the out breath. And seeing if you can stay with the end of the exhalation all the way to that vanishing point. Where it becomes the next breath in. And maybe there's a tiny pause between the breaths, where that in breath becomes an out breath. Where the new in breath is born and then passes away as you breathe out. Just sensing and feeling the rise and fall of the breath in the body. The birth and death of each breath. Letting yourself breathe in your own natural rhythm. And if for any reason the breath is not a calming or soothing subject of attention and meditation for you, you can practice this same awareness of the arising and passing away of sensations in the body, or of the sounds of life around you. Just breathing in and breathing out. Noticing the flow and play of sensation, the rise and fall of the abdomen, the feeling of expansion and contraction of the rib cage, the lungs. The coolness of the inhalation, the subtle warmth of the exhalation. Gradually allowing the nervous energy of the body to calm down. As the body relaxes, so do the mind and the heart. Little by little, moment by moment, breath by breath. If the mind is very busy and jumpy or agitated, just bringing a little more attention to the out breath, that calming, relaxing breath. And if the mind is sleepy or dull, just bringing a little more attention to that energizing in-breath. And when you find yourself lost in thought, just shifting the body back. Oh, maybe just an inch. Just shifting back into receiving the moment, receiving the breath. And again, coming back to the body, feeling the breath in the body, sensations in the body, the vibrations of sound reverberating through the body. over and over again, steadying the heart with the breath, being present with the body, with whatever's happening in the mind. Opening, steadying, with kind awareness, loving awareness. For this moment of life, this moment in all eternity. This is basic training, bringing the mind back to presence over and over, again and again. Turning toward experience, breathing into it, just seeing what's what. As you're present with experience unfolding, wisdom is very simple. So last week I talked about the 11 benefits of metta, of loving kindness practice. And metta, like all of the Brahma Viharas, the divine places where the heart can dwell, love and compassion and joy and equanimity, all of these Brahma Viharas support wise presence, support wisdom. But I want to speak specifically about wisdom today because I love the way that wisdom is understood in Buddhist psychology, philosophy, and practice. Wisdom is understood from a very practical point of view of just the wisdom to know how to handle what arises in experience in a skillful or wise way. Skillful in in this tradition, when we use the word skillful, it it comes from a Sanskrit or Pali word, upaya, which means a skillful means. It's skillful. It's always practical. It's about skillful tools or skillful ways of being and doing things that are healthy and that are onward leading. And that's another phrase I love from this tradition. Onward leading means what? Leading to the end of suffering, leading to freeing the heart from greed, hate, delusion, leading toward happiness. So this understanding of wisdom, it depends on our understanding of impermanence, our understanding of the transient nature of everything. It depends on our being able to bear witness to the arising and passing away of experience. And we practice doing that in this kind of basic training of mindfulness meditation, where we're mindful of breathing in and breathing out. And this is what the Buddha taught. Or mindful of the arising and passing away of anything, of sound, of sensation. We could say thoughts and feelings too, but it's a little bit trickier to develop that skill of being able to be the loving witness of one's own thinking, because it's so seductive to get carried away by that flood of thinking. So that's why we bring the attention back to focus on the body, and that's why the first foundation of mindfulness is awareness of body, of the breath in the body, of the mortality of the body, of the elements that comprise the body, anything that can bring a sense of a little bit of healthy detachment or dispassion, or the ability to observe, to be aware, as opposed to being caught in all the phenomena that that are constantly drawing our attention, especially the painful things. And I'm going to paraphrase it, I can't remember exactly. I love this quote from Suzuki Roshi, where he talks about Suzuki Roshi was the founder of the San Francisco Zen Center, who came from Japan originally to teach the Japanese community in San Francisco, and then there were all these hippies who were interested in meditation, and so he began to teach them, the Westerners, and then out of that grew the San Francisco Zen Center. And he wrote one of the most wonderful, I refer to it often here, wonderful books about meditation that was published, I think, in 1971 and remained. It was my first meditation teacher, that book, before I met an in-person teacher. And it's still one of the deepest, I think, books about meditation practice. I feel like wherever I am, as deep as I go in my practice, Suzuki Roshi is always waiting there, ready to meet me. And he talks about impermanence as the way that things are always falling out of balance in our life. And that's so familiar, isn't it? Oh God, I remember especially in my 20s when I would just get one thing settled. Okay, have a place to live, a good living situation. And then I didn't have a job, or I'd get a good job, finally a job. Yes, this feels right. And then the living situation would fall apart. And then, it would just be so hard, right? It's so hard to get it all together. That was the expression we used to, I've got to get it together. But then we realize the older we get that we never can get it all together, actually. It's always falling out of balance. And that's a great comfort. It's really the first noble truth, that there is that suffering in this life, that we don't ever get it all together. So how can we relax with the impermanence and find our composure? And so what Suzuki Roshi said is everything's continually falling out of balance against a backdrop of perfect balance. So what is that backdrop of perfect balance? And where is it? And how do we find it? And how do we live there? Unfortunately, as always with this practice, the way out is through. You can do concentration practices with a mantra or a visualization where you really focus. The book is called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And he said, where you really focus one pointedly and just develop and train your attention to be in this one pointed focus of concentration. And the thing is, you can get into these very, very beautiful, sublime states. It can be really relaxing for the nervous system. But there isn't wisdom in that, because you're having to shut everything else out in order to get that fixated and concentrated. And that is not the way the Buddha taught, actually. He really didn't teach getting into these very exalted states of concentration. It's fine if you get into those states. They can be beautiful and wonderful, but he did not, that teaching of that kind of concentration and fixated attention really came 500 years later with the Visuddhimagga, and that's more than probably most of you care or need to know, but I find it inspiring because it means that I don't have to be in this super ultra concentrated state that I can only get into, in weeks of silent retreat in order to develop wisdom and succeed, have this practice work for me in my life. And the same, of course, is true for you and everybody. So beginning to understand viscerally this impermanence in life is the root of wisdom. All things shall pass. We have lots of maybe cliches, and the thing about cliches is they arise because, right, they're kind of true in experience. And there's a famous story that's sort of the story in about the Buddha and impermanence, the story of Kisa Gotami, which many of you know. And I recently discovered that Nick Cave actually wrote a song with this story of Kisa Gotami in it. But for those of you who may not know the story, I'll just tell it to you. So Kisa Gotami was a villager who's had a tragedy, which is that her son died. And she, at first, she could not absorb the truth of his death, and she carried her dead baby around, and asked people for help. And the villagers, everybody felt so sorry for her. And one old woman said, go see the Buddha. He can help you. Because she said, I need to revive my child. My child is so sick. My child is so sick. And so she goes to see the Buddha, carrying her dead boy. And the Buddha says, yes, I can revive your child if you bring me one white mustard seed from the house of someone where nobody has died. And so she begins her journey, her pilgrimage, and she goes from house to house, begging people, hugging this baby and crying and begging people for a mustard seed. And what she, of course, discovers as she goes from house to house is what? There is no family in the entire village that hasn't experienced the death of a loved one or lost somebody. And so, here's how I'm not going to sing it for you. You're going to be spared that. But here's how Nick tells the story. It's at the end of a long song called Hollywood. And it's very mournful, but it's beautiful. Kisa had a baby, but the baby died. Goes to villagers, says, my baby's sick. Villagers shake their heads and say to her, better bury your baby in the forest, quick. It's a long way to find peace of mind. Peace of mind, that's the refrain. Kisa went to the mountain and asked the Buddha, my baby's sick. The Buddha said, don't cry. Go to each house and collect a mustard seed, but only from the house where no one died. Kisa went to each house in the village. My baby's getting sicker, poor Kisa cried. But Kisa never collected one mustard seed. In every house, someone had died. Kisa sat down in the old village square. She hugged her baby, so sad, and cried and cried. She said, everybody's always losing somebody, then walked into the forest and buried her child. Everyone's losing someone. It's a long way to find peace of mind, etc., the refrain. So that is the apocryphal story about impermanence and about understanding impermanence in this visceral way, not just intellectually. Of course, intellectually we all understand impermanence, we do. But how do we understand it in this really viscerally felt sense, really knowing impermanence? And that's how she understood. And that's usually how each one of us comes to understand, through our losses. And what is it that stays steady amidst the changing nature of all of us, of experience of this life? What is the one kind of pure, clear, steady thing? That's a big koan. That's a Zen koan, we say. That was a koan that my first teacher, San Sanim, wrote in his calligraphy. He made a calligraphy. It was framed, and it was in the Zendo. And when we would do the walking meditation in between sitting meditation periods, we would do mindful walking meditation. And I remember walking round and round doing mindful walking and always seeing that question, because it was translated into English. His calligraphy was in Korean, but then it was translated into English, where he said, the question was just, what is the one pure and clear thing? That's how the koan was stated. And I remember just always seeing that, walking round and round and seeing that. And it finally dawned on me, it's always here with us. What is that one pure and clear thing? So before I unpack that a little more, I want you to take a moment to do, I guess as a kind of exercise, to just maybe close your eyes for a minute and think of a time when you were with somebody that you felt was wise. And then what did that feel like to be with somebody in your life who was wise? Or when you talked with them in the middle of your difficulties, like what did their eyes convey? What did you see in their eyes? And what did you feel from their heart? And so, then open your eyes when you're ready. And you can just put in the chat, what it is that you felt or thought or sensed when you were with that person who was wise. Yeah, you can just put that in the chat and we'll see. Then everybody can see what it is that you experienced in that moment, or in that time that you got to spend together. Because the thing is, wisdom in this way is really simple. That space of that we give experience, that space that we can create around experience is the space of awareness. And yeah, I'll keep talking a little while you write down your responses and then we can read them. And how do you create that space? How do you give some space to your experience, to yourself in the midst of your experience? How do you do that? You do it by staying in touch with what's happening, being in touch with just what is, seen, felt, sensed, all of it, being in touch with that. And then when you're in touch with it, that's the tricky part, just to stop the thinking that says it shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't be having this experience. This shouldn't be happening to me. Something's wrong with you, or something's wrong with me, or, all of that. Just staying with the intensity of what's happening, whatever it may be, aware of the fear and the thoughts and the aversion to it, but with just some warmth, gentle, steady, grounding, warming with sympathy, if that's what is being called for, a little kindness, a little tenderness, or cooling off, if that's what's called for, just letting, this is how it is right now, this will pass, this is wisdom, I can relax. This is how direct wisdom works, direct experience in your life. So I just want to look and see what people have said. Yeah. Safety, feeling hope and compassion, love, understanding and safety, care and safety, non-judging acceptance. That's, getting out of those thoughts of that should be different somehow, connection, peace, trust in the unfolding. Yeah, this is beautiful, all of it. Love, connection, my own fear of being so vulnerable, the acceptance of what we have and of what we don't have. Yes. The way of happiness, calmness, trust that the eye of the hurricane really does exist. Yes, may I let go. Yeah. So this is all of these qualities that are so beautiful and so wise. They actually come from this basic, what would we call it? Like unromantic training in attention, moment by moment, bringing attention back, being mindful. I mean, I teach these things so many years and so much. Sometimes I get sick of hearing it. And the words start to just sound like, not like gibberish or anything, but just like, oh God, yeah, right. I've, been there, done that, heard that. People like Rick who've been to every teaching for millions of years, right? You've heard it all. But when you get into the direct practice of it or the direct experience of it, it's not easy. It's challenging. It's interesting. And you learn so much, because it's not We have so much intellectual knowing and understanding, and we value that rightly. And, for thousands of years or hundreds of years, as long as we've had libraries, or people have always had some repository, whether it's oral history or written history, and there's been written history for way longer than historians thought before, thousands of years before. All of this repository of human knowledge, it's it's just different. Wisdom is different from that knowledge, as valuable as it is, that knowledge that fills all the libraries and yeah, all the books, and the knowledge that I feel each time somebody does die, the knowledge that is lost with that person, or my mother's knowledge of gardening and cooking, that she had tremendous wisdom and knowledge in that department. Or, when David Bohm died, right on the eve of some new discovery in physics, just, oh no, that knowledge has died. But this knowledge is extremely simple. It's the knowledge you find in the Tao Te Ching. It's the knowledge you find in the Dhammapada. It's indigenous people's traditions and wisdom. And it just invites this simplicity of presence. And with that simplicity of presence comes some equanimity too, like, oh yeah, this is the way things are. It's not so personal anymore. It's like, yeah, this is fear. It's not just I'm so afraid of being vulnerable or whatever I'm afraid of, all the things. It's also, this is fear. This is what it's like to be a human being who's afraid. This is part of human nature. This is part of humanity, of humanness, of nature. And we can then be more present with an equanimous or a wise heart. Just to be able to pause, to sit for a moment. Or whatever it may be, when you're really flooded, it may need to be walking and maybe not sitting quietly. Or if you're recovering from COVID or from surgery or from whatever you may be recovering from, you may need to lie down, just to lie down and be present in a lying down posture. Or just to go outside. Sometimes I just go outside first thing in the morning and just stand there and smell the morning. And smell, yeah, the morning. And this is how we touch into this intuitive wisdom, this natural wisdom. And this is how it's a process of handling and staying in touch with what's being felt and experienced in our lives, and steadying our minds and hearts so that we can come out of whatever fixated, obsessed state that we're in, that we can turn toward that and find a wiser response to it, to just stay with this process, which is always pretty much the same. It's just that the content is so different. It feels different each time, but it's always, returning to the body, connecting with the felt sense of what has arisen, feeling it in the body, beginning to warm it up if it needs, if it's harsh criticism or something, cool it off if it's just like rage or other intense emotion, just to be able to see where it goes, to see how it unfolds, to understand how to begin to calm down the nervous energy in the body, and to see clearly what's happening. And it's a superpower that every single one of us has if we decide to do that basic training. It really is. It's like yoga of the mind, how to get flexible, be able to be in all these weird postures of whatever, anger and resentment or craving, all the weird postures the mind gets into. And how can we be flexible with that and just stay balanced as things are continually falling out of balance? And I'm laughing or smiling, but it's not easy. Life can be so overwhelming sometimes. And yet we have this source of steadying, of wisdom in our hearts. We each do, whether it's standing or sitting or walking or doing a mantra, whatever it is that that helps us not get completely, drowned or swept away in the floods of intense emotion that can just sweep our hearts away. So this is also a description of the Buddha's enlightenment. And by that I mean understanding, this is understanding the foundations of mindfulness, understanding the Four Noble Truths, that yes, there is getting swept away, there is suffering, there is losing our balance, and there's a cause for that. And we can begin to see how one thing leads to another, and how, the causes of where we get stuck and our habits that get us into trouble, we can begin to see that. And then the seeing of that and the pausing to be present and to bring our basic training to it, that is the cessation of it. And the path is all the trainings and how to do this. So this is, in a nutshell, what the Buddha taught. So thank you. That's what I want to share with you this morning. And thank you, everybody. And now we'll take a minute or two for you to pause and check in and see what it is that you might like to hear more about, or share from your own experience, or have any question, whatever it might be. This is your chance.